Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Harry Anderson, and welcome to this Universities UK webinar, where we're basically going to be covering off what the UK's new points-based immigration system really means. I should say right from the start that the slides that I'm going to be presenting today should be available. They should have dropped into attendees now, so you should have access to them. If you don't worry, we're going to go through this quite slowly and sort of hopefully cover off in as much detail as we can. And a version of this presentation will be available next week on Monday, and it's also going to be recorded, so you can go back and watch it at your own sort of leisurely pace as well. We've got about 45 minutes today. We hopefully will have some time at the end for any questions. But if we don't have time to answer them today, we're more than happy to take them away and get any clarifications and answer any questions for you in due course. So rest assured, everyone's questions will be answered. Now, I guess just in terms of what we're going to be covering on the webinar, if we go to the next slide, there's quite a lot of people attending today's webinar in lots of different roles, and so we are going to try and cover as much as possible and recognise that it is quite a complex area and there's a lot to cover in terms of the new immigration routes. So this is a brief outline of what we'll go through today. So a bit of a sort of political update and the timelines between now and the 1st of January, which is obviously when the new points-based system really kicks in and when freedom of movement ends. We'll then cover two sort of areas in detail. So that's coming to study. So that's the new student route, the graduate route, and then the short-term study arrangements. I know there's a lot of people that are interested from an Erasmus perspective on this call. And then we'll also look at coming to work as well and the work requirements. So the main work route is what's known as the skilled worker route, which is formerly known as Tier 2, but we'll also go through some of the other work routes and try and cover those off in detail too. So first of all, like I say, so timescales timelines between now and the 1st of January. I don't think this will be a surprise to anyone on the call, but obviously sort of freedom of movement is ending at the end of this year. And so the cutoff for this sort of new immigration system ending and the new one coming online is 31st of December. So any EU national, EEA national or Swiss citizen who is arriving in the UK before the 31st of December does not need to apply through the points-based system. Just want to make that absolutely clear. I'm sure everyone is aware of that, but it is worth just starting off by saying that obviously this comes into effect from the 1st of January, really. And if you come to the UK before that point, obviously you're still entitled and able to apply to the EU settlement scheme, and that is open until the 30th of June 2021. So you can come up until the 31st of December and then apply by June to make sure that you can sort of stay and be part of that EU settlement scheme. If you arrive after that point, 1st of January from 2021, you will need to apply for the appropriate sort of immigration permission, whether that's sort of wanting to come to be a student or to work, and so we can go through that in later detail in this presentation. And it's also worth stressing that Irish nationals are not required to apply for the EU settlement scheme, and they will continue to be able to sort of live, work and study in the UK as was due to the Common Traveller Area Agreement. So they are sort of exempt from what we're talking about today. So hopefully none of that will be a surprise, but I think it's important just to sort of cover that off in the first instance. The next thing I just sort of wanted to sort of update on, because I know we've been having a lot of questions and comments on this, is what does the EU settlement scheme mean for fee status? Now, this is something we're trying to get further clarification on. We know that there is sort of questions to be answered still. And so I've just included on the slide there the latest that the Universities Minister, Michelle Donnellan, has said. So this was from a few days ago, the 30th of October, and it essentially clarifies that EU nationals with settled status under the settlement scheme and who meet the relevant eligibility requirements should have access to home fee status and student financial support. So that should protect their rights going forward. So there's a lot of text there. I don't suggest sort of going sort of through it line by line, but I just wanted to sort of include this as the latest information and that we have on this issue, because I know that a lot of people are asking questions about this and sort of do have comments. Again, if people have questions at the end of this on fee status and the EU settlement scheme, I'm sure we can hopefully try and answer those or take them away. So, like I say, so the first area that I really wanted to cover was the student route and what happens if you're coming to study. So if anyone is sort of already familiar with the immigration route and the student immigration system, this is basically what is replacing what has been known as Tier 4 up until this point. So the student route has actually already gone live. So it went live at the start of October, on 5th of October, and it allows EU students and non-EU students to apply for a course 6 months before it starts. That's actually an increase from the previous 3 months. As I've sort of just mentioned there, the key difference is that obviously it applies to all international students, so EU and non-EU. And there's some details there about the cost of what an application for the student route will be. It is worth just emphasising there that the immigration health surcharge, which you will have to pay as part of the application fee if you're coming on the student route, it has just recently been increased to 470, so that was in the last few days, so it's just worth highlighting that. Now, the student route is part of the points-based immigration system, as I'm sure everyone will have heard about, but like I say, this is sort of replacing the old Tier 4 system, and so if you're familiar with the Tier 4 system, the requirements are very similar, and little has really changed in practice. So we'll go through that in a second, but essentially the big change is that this now applies obviously to EU, EEA nationals, Swiss nationals too. It's the scope has been increased essentially in terms of who has to go through this route in order to study in the UK. I've also included there something about the work placements. Again, we've had some questions on this recently, but essentially work placement restrictions, i.e. that work placements must be an integral part of a course, hasn't changed from Tier 4 to the student route. I think there has been some suggestion that there has been further restrictions, but from the conversations we've had with the Home Office, nothing's changed on that. And actually, if a work placement is a requirement as part of a course, that's fine, that's acceptable, that's not going to cause any concerns from the Home Office perspective. But again, happy to take questions on that point. And then the final thing to sort of flag is when the student route went live, there was also some changes to the ATAS scheme, and so essentially there's now been an increase in the exemptions or the exempt countries from applying to an ATAS for an ATAS certificate. And those are included below, so sort of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, etc. So I think, again, that's a sort of positive development as well, but we can talk about that later. So like I say, it is a points-based route, it is a points-based application, but the points essentially correlate to sort of everything that you would be expecting to provide as part of the old Tier 4 system. So it's just outlined there, but essentially, you know, you get points for basically having being eligible to study at the provider. You get further points for the sort of financial requirements that you can demonstrate, and then you get some further points for sort of English language ability as well. So in total, that will come to the 70 points that you need for this route. As I say, kind of nothing there should be a huge surprise to anyone that has sort of looked into the Tier 4 route, and we don't think there's any sort of any kind of surprises lurking in the details there. So it should be fairly straightforward in terms of if you're needing to get the points to study on the student route. Now, one of the big sort of new developments and one of the new advantages, I think, of the UK's new points-based immigration system is the graduate route. Now, this is something that Universities UK and the sector, the university sector, has been pushing for quite some time, and it's a fantastic opportunity for people that do want to come and study in the UK. It's one of the sort of key advantages, essentially, and it's a new route that is eligible to people who have studied in the UK. It's not launched yet, it's sort of still in development, but it will be launching in the summer of 2021. We haven't got an exact date yet, but it is coming online over the next sort of few months into next year. and it will basically provide students with 2 years or 3 years if you've done a PhD. And that 2 year or 3 year period is essentially time for you to look for work or to work in the UK. And it's a very generous sort of, very generous conditions in terms of the work can be at any skill level. You aren't needing to sort of apply straight to another type of visa sort of after this, so you don't need to go through the sort of skilled worker visa, which we'll come on to. So it is essentially a sort of 2 year breathing space, 3 year, like I say, if you've done a PhD. And essentially it's some time for you to sort of spend in the UK looking for work or working at a sort of a level that you want to. Now, there are some sort of further details that we need to sort of clarify with the government on this, and that is something we're working on. So again, throughout this presentation, I'll sort of tell you as much as we can and as much as we know to date, but there are still things that we perhaps don't know. And on the graduate route, one of the things that we are working with the government on is sort of, obviously we recognise that the COVID pandemic has had a big impact. So what the government have said is that if you can't come to the UK because of the pandemic, provided you get to the UK by the 6th of April 2021, if you're studying online, if you get to the UK by the 6th of April 2021, you'll still be eligible for the graduate route. So you still have that opportunity for sort of 2 years or like I say, 3 years if you've done a PhD. To sort of look for work or work in the UK. So that's a really kind of positive thing, but there are still questions that we need to work out a bit more on the graduate route, and again, happy to answer any questions on those. So like I said, I think there's quite a few people who are interested in Erasmus or the short-term study arrangements under the new immigration system. So I've included as much as we know at the moment on this. So first of all, if you're interested in studying for less than 6 months, we think it's a sort of fairly straightforward arrangement for that scenario. So as it says there, if you're wanting to come to the UK for less than 6 months, you'll be able to apply under what are known as the new visitor route rules. That is provided that the sort of studies at an accredited institution, and if there's students who are interested and sort of individuals that are interested in short-term study, we recommend you talking to the institution and then finding out if they're an accredited institution in the first place. But essentially this will replace sort of the current short-term study arrangements, and non-visa nationals, so they are nationals who are essentially sort of countries within the EU, can seek entry to the UK on arrival. They don't sort of need to sort of pay or apply for that permission in advance, and they can enter just using their e-passports via the e-gate. So it should be a really simple, straightforward arrangement. So that should be fairly beneficial for anyone interested in studying for less than 6 months. Now that's a key distinction, because if you're studying for over 6 months, and we recognise that obviously a lot of short-term study arrangements are sort of 6 to 9 months in that ballpark, there are slightly different arrangements, and we recognise that there is perhaps further work to do here. So at the moment, the arrangement is that you would have to study, you'd have to apply to enter the UK via the student route, which is what we've just gone through. Obviously that route is sort of, I guess most people will be using it for 2, 3, 4 years degree programs or similar. But if you're looking to do anything over 6 months in terms of short-term study arrangements, the student route is the route you would have to go through under the current arrangements. As it says on that slide, we are looking at what we can do around sort of that 6 to sort of 12-month period, because we do recognise there is a lot of students who that is sort of the period of time at which they would be looking to study for. And we do recognise that the student route could be quite an expensive route if you are only looking to study for a short period of time. And again, as that slide says, there is still the 11-month short-term English language study route. That hasn't changed. That sort of arrangement is carrying on as was. So if that's what you're interested in doing, coming for an English language course, then that 11-month short-term route is still available, and nothing really is changing on that front. So I think that's everything in terms of the sort of studying aspect. If we perhaps move on to the sort of, if you're coming coming to the UK to work, or if you're sort of a researcher or anything like that, we'll go through the sort of different scenarios now for that. And I think the first thing I sort of wanted to sort of talk about was the skilled worker route. So that is replacing what was known as Tier 2. So obviously The student route was replacing tier 4. The skilled worker route is replacing tier 2. Now, again, big change here, like with the student route, is that the skilled worker route will apply to EU and non-EU citizens. Again, remembering that Irish exemption that we talked about right at the start. There are some, lots of positive developments though that we've seen with the skilled worker route, and I think there is the direction of travel is fairly positive. So previously, under the tier 2 route, you could only sponsor someone if they were at a certain skill level, which was RQF 6, which was essentially sort of degree level and above. They've dropped that now to sort of what is RQF level 3, so that's sort of roughly A level. So that basically means that a lot more roles can be sponsored. So if you're an institution listening to this, obviously there's a sort of the opportunity to sponsor a wider range of roles. Another sort of key advantage is that the salary threshold has been lowered too. So previously that salary threshold was £30,000. That's now been dropped to 25,600. There are caveats with this as well, and we know this is sort of an area of sort of question or concern for members, and so we'll go through that in a bit more detail later on. But this is sort of where the points-based element really kicks in for the UK's points-based immigration system. So if that 25,600 salary is an issue, there are points which can be traded against the salary. So you can pay a slightly lower salary and you'd still be able to sort of come to the UK to work. So we'll cover that off in more detail, because I recognise it's a slightly kind of complicated area. But just very briefly, some of the other benefits or key changes really from the tier 2 to the skilled worker route. There won't be any cap on the number of skilled workers that can come to the UK. So previously tier 2 visas were capped, and there won't be a sort of a limit on the length of time which an individual can spend on the skilled worker route, and there won't be any cooling off periods. So previously, if you came on a skilled worker route, there was a sort of cap after which you had to apply for indefinite leave to remain, or essentially sort of leave. So that's another positive benefit. And finally, yeah, you can switch into the skilled worker route from different routes without having to sort of leave and without having to apply from outside the UK. So again, some positive benefits there that are on the slide. So I went through the points for the student route. The points for the skilled worker route are unfortunately a bit more complicated, as hopefully this slide demonstrates. I recognise there's a lot on there, so we'll kind of go through this in a bit more detail, but I think the key thing just to sort of take away to start with is that there are two sort of aspects to how the points will work for the skilled worker route. The first is that there will be sort of 50 points which are essentially non-tradable, non-negotiable. You have to meet those no matter kind of who you are or what you're coming to do. And that the three things that sort of add to those sort of mandatory points are you need to have an offer of a job from an approved sponsor. So the organisation needs to have a sponsor licence. The job needs to be at an appropriate skill level. And as we've just said, that skill level has been lowered. So there are more jobs that are available. And then the English language requirements, like with coming to study, you need to be able to speak an appropriate level of English. And so that also gets you some points as well. So those come to 50 points, which are compulsory, sort of non-negotiable, mandatory, however you want to describe it. And then, as you can see underneath that, there are then where the tradable points kick in, which is sort of how you can look at navigating the sort of salary restrictions if that's sort of required. So I'll move on. That slide is obviously there for you to refer back to if you're looking at the slides yourself. As I sort of just mentioned, that's the mandatory points. I don't think we need to sort of go into those in too much detail. They shouldn't be a surprise. I think again they're sort of fairly straightforward. But as I say, sort of perhaps want to focus on the tradable points aspect a bit more, because I think that is where the skilled worker route is a bit complicated and where we need to sort of, I guess, digest what the changes to the immigration system really mean. So, as we said, we've got the sort of 50 mandatory points. This is where then the salary comes in. So you've got the 50 points so far, you need another 20 to be able to come on the skilled worker route. Now, if an individual is paid the higher of the general salary threshold, which is 25,600, or the going rate for the particular job, and the going rate is linked to the job you're doing. It's linked to this sort of what we call a SOP code. If you're paid the higher of either of those two, you get the 20 points. It's not a problem. You reach the 70 that's required with, you get through. That's all fine. If that's not the case, but you earn above this sort of threshold of 20,480, which is an absolute baseline, you can't go lower than that. If you earn less than that sort of either the going rate or the general salary threshold, but above that 20,480, you can still come via the skilled worker route. But as it says there, you kind of need to have some other things that to your name, some other points on your application, which allow you to sort of enter via the skilled worker route. That's a relevant PhD. The job that you're applying to do must be seen as in a shortage occupation, and we can come on to that, or you must be a new entrant to the labour market. So we'll go into that in a tiny bit more detail because, like I say, it is complicated. So essentially, as we say, you get some points for if you hold a PhD. Now, if you hold a PhD in a non-STEM subject, that equates to essentially 10% lower than the going rate of your salary that you're applying to. If you've got a PhD in a STEM subject, that then equates to 20% lower salary. And then if you have a job that's in a shortage occupation, so the MAC, the Migration Advisory Committee, they outline jobs that are deemed to be in shortage. And if your job is listed on that list, then you get a 20% discount on the salary. And then finally, as it says there, the fourth area is as I mentioned, if you're a new entrant to the labour market, you get a 30% discount. And that's sort of, recognising that you're perhaps earlier on in your career. So I understand that that's sort of, a bit hard to get your head around. So we've gone through some examples to sort of try and make that a bit more tangible. So the first instance is if you're looking to come to the UK, say as a research assistant, so that SOC code, as I mentioned, is what you call 2119. And the thing to mention is that the salary threshold, the going rate, which we talked about, that's based on a sort of 39-hour per week contract. So you then pro-rata it for whatever your contract would be. So in this instance, Mr. A is a research assistant. He's coming under that SOC code. The contract is for 37 hours a week. And the starting salary will be paid at 26,715. Now, the going rate for that SOC code is actually 33,000, but that, like I say, is based on a 39 hours per week contract. So if you pro-rata that, you do just the 37 hours, that means that the going rate that this individual needs to sort of meet is 31,308. Now you can see there straight from the off, if the starting salary that they're being offered is 26,000, but the going rate is 31, we've got a bit of a problem. Now, obviously that's over the general salary threshold that we talked about, but as I said, it's got to be the higher of the two. So it's either got to be the general salary threshold or the higher of the going rate. So whichever of those is higher. As we can see there, the going rate is 31,000, so it's higher. So what can this individual do in order to navigate the sort of to the 70 points required? Well, in this instance, the research assistant, Mr. A, is going to be a new entrant to the labour market, and they're going to be given a sort of COS, a certificate of sponsorship, which is less than 4 years. It needs to be less than 4 years if they're a new entrant, to match the sort of length of contract, which, as it says at the top there, is 3 years. So they're classed as a new entrant. That means they are able to trade points with salary. Anyone that can remember, that was what, 30% discount. So provided Mr. A is paid 70% of that going rate, i.e. the 30% discount, they gain the additional 20 points. Now, if you can do the maths, 26,000 is well over 70% of the 31,000 that is needed. So Mr. A, the research assistant, gets in absolutely fine, no problems at all. The second scenario is, if my screen will work, there we go, sorry, is a university lecturer. So Dr. B's SOC code is 2311. That's the sort of higher education teaching professional SOC code. And they are employed on a permanent contract at 35 hours a week. The starting salary is 33,797. So, like we say, go back to whatever the going rate for that SOC code is. All SOC codes have a going rate, and they're outlined, and you can find them on the government website. So the SOC code for this individual and this SOC code is 40,000 at a 39-hour a week contract. As we said, they're being paid on a 35-hour a week contract, so that brings their going rate for their salary to 36,000. Now that is over the general salary threshold, but it's obviously still below the going rate for that SOC code. So they're being paid 33,000. That's over the 25,000. It's not at that 36,000 level. Again, this is sort of quite complicated. So what can this individual do in order to sort of get the additional points needed for the skilled worker? Well, in this instance, Dr. B has a PhD in STEM. That obviously means they're eligible for a 20% discount on their salary, and that means that they are eligible, again, doing the maths, 33,000 is well over the 80% needed, and so they are eligible to come to the UK via the PhD STEM discount. And then the final example on the skilled worker route is this lab technician role. So the lab technician SOC code is 3111. They're employed on a permanent contract at 36 hours, and the starting salary will be 23,000. Now, the going rate for the sort of lab technicians, as defined, is 18,200. Again, that's 39 hours a week. So for 36 hours a week, the going rate is 16,000. Now, this is where we've included this example to sort of show an instance where you wouldn't be eligible to come on the skilled worker route. Now, obviously that 16,000 is lower than the general salary threshold. So you've got to be able to meet that 25,000 anyway, even though Miss C's starting salary is above the general, the going rate for that role. It's not above the general salary threshold. So that's where, again, just to reiterate that point, it's got to be the higher of the general salary threshold of 25,600 and the going rate. So it's got to be whichever's highest. So in this instance, £23,000, it's not above the going rate. It is above the going rate, but it's not above the general salary threshold. So they can't score 20 points. And unfortunately, in this instance, they don't have a PhD. They're not a new entrant to the labour market. And so there isn't really any sort of tradable points that they can trade against their salary. And so in this scenario, unfortunately, this individual would not be eligible to come on the skilled worker route. So that's just an example of again, sort of trying to show you how the skilled, the sort of points, tradable points aspect of the skilled worker route really works. So those examples are included for individuals to take away and digest. Hopefully gone through them with enough detail, but I'll sort of move on now away from the skilled worker route, because I think we spent quite a bit of time just going through that. There are some other routes which I think we just wanted to sort of draw attention to and highlight and make sure that individuals are aware. The first is the global talent route. Now, this is a sort of a new immigration route which is designed for sort of promising individuals or talented individuals wanting to work in particular sectors. To be eligible for this route, it's a different way to enter the UK, and it's essentially your application must be endorsed by a recognised UK body. And those bodies are sort of identified by the Home Office, the UK Home Office. So, for instance, UKRI, UK Research and Innovation, sort of are the established and recognised body for science and research. The Royal Society for sort of Science and Medicine. So, essentially, you apply to the Home Office, and they will take your application. They'll direct it to one of these recognised bodies. And if your application is approved and you're successful, the advantage of the global talent route is that it is a very generous offer if you're looking to come and work in the UK. And it allows successful applicants up to 5 years without sort of, you don't have a sponsor or entry requirements like we have with the skilled worker route. So, those language tests, those minimum salaries that we've just been going through, they're all sort of exempt. And, you can sort of, it's very generous in that you can move around employers without updating that information to the Home Office. So it is sort of very, very generous. And for anyone that is sort of, again, previously involved in sort of immigration, this has replaced the Tier 1 exceptional talent visa, which was previously online. This actually kind of went live in February of this year as well, so it's been up and running for a bit of time now. The key change is that from the 1st of January, obviously, again, EU nationals are included within its scope. And then the final couple of routes that I wanted to talk about, and then we've perhaps got some time for questions, so feel free to obviously be putting any questions forward, are the startup and innovator routes, and they're two sort of different routes, but sort of lumped together because they're fairly sort of similar. So they're essentially designed to sort of attract entrepreneurs to the UK, and sort of those who have innovative ideas, which could be sort of scalable business ideas in the UK. And applicants via this route can be either individuals or within a team. So the startup route is for those who are looking to start up, as the name would suggest, a sort of innovative business for the first time, whilst the innovator route is there for sort of those who are a bit more established, who have industry expertise, and crucially have at least £50,000 worth of funding. Now, again, sort of individuals going through this route require the support of an endorsing body before applying, and that endorsing body essentially must have assessed the business idea beforehand, and basically given approval that it's an innovative, viable, and scalable business. And I suppose the key thing to draw attention here is that universities, higher education providers, including other business organisations, are endorsing bodies. But they have to have a track record in supporting UK-based entrepreneurs, as well as the support of the government department. So just there to sort of, I suppose, highlight the fact that there are several kind of routes available to individuals who are looking to come to the UK. We've focused obviously on the skilled worker route because I think it is one of the it is the main work route. There is a lot to get through, but I think what we're just sort of keen to sort of highlight and emphasize here is that there are other routes available. Like I say, startup, innovator, and global talent route are just sort of three other of the work routes that are available. If there's people on this call interested in sort of exploring the different options essentially that are available. Now, I think that's sort of all the kind of update and talking that we would sort of wanted to sort of go through. I've included my email there for people if they want to get in touch separately, but I think we are starting to have some questions come through. So the first question I think is, which route will Erasmus trainees come under? They currently come under Tier 5. So I think that is a sort of question, if I'm right in understanding, is about Erasmus, individuals coming on a work placement to do with Erasmus. Now, that is one area where if you go back in your slides to the sort of what happens for short-term study arrangements, we haven't put on that what's this current situation with work arrangements because there is still uncertainty. So I think, as everyone knows and as everyone is aware, there are still Brexit negotiations ongoing. We're not sure kind of what will happen with regards to our future participation in Erasmus. And we know the government is looking at alternatives for if we don't end up participating in future Erasmus programs. That is why at the moment the government haven't really been able to outline what would happen in those scenarios. Now, our hope is that the current arrangements, so the sort of government authorised exchange programme and Tier 5 will be the route in which an individual will be able to sort of continue to come to the UK. That is sort of what we're pushing for in the short term, to make sure there is no disruption and to provide that sort of certainty and clarity for individuals. I think in the long term, what we would then want to see, and what we're keen to sort of talk to the UK government about, is creating a sort of a route which combines short-term study and short-term work placements up to sort of 12 months. That would be a separate immigration and visa sort of category, and which would be sort of quick, easy, cost-effective, and sort of I suppose kind of cater to those individuals that, like I said, sort of at the start, we know are coming to sort of want to come for maybe 9 months, 12 months, and who perhaps the current student route is not the designed route. So at the moment we perhaps can't answer that in terms of precisely what will happen, but I think our priority and our preference is for this sort of the current Tier 5 route to sort of remain an option. So we have another question here. I can see it. We have several current EU students who left the UK in March 2020 due to the pandemic and have not applied for the pre-settled scheme until now. They have not wanted or been able to return to the UK since the pandemic began and are studying their course online. They will still be approved. Will they still be approved for pre-settled status if they cannot get into the UK before the 31st of December seeing as they have been out of the country for over 6 months, or will they need to consider? Now, essentially, so that is a good question. I think that is something that we unfortunately again are looking to get further clarification on. We know that there are many individuals who are in a similar situation to that, in that they have sort of left the country at the time that the pandemic started and have now been outside the UK for a significant amount of time. The government is looking to publish some further sort of clarification and guidance for those who have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic in relation to the EU settlement scheme. And certainly our preference would be that individuals who have had to leave the UK because of that pandemic and who haven't felt comfortable or able to come back to the UK because of the sort of ongoing situation, our preference is that they obviously would still be eligible, but at the moment that has not been confirmed. And so, I think what we would say is that if you're an individual applying to the EU settlement scheme, essentially it's, if you've not been to the UK before, make sure you are in the UK by the 31st of December. And I think we would just say, make sure that you kind of apply as early as possible, and that you have sort of evidence of you being in the UK before the 31st of December. But yeah, again, recognise that is a question that a lot of people probably have, and that we are looking to get clarification on, and so we can take that one away. And like I say, we are aware that the Home Office are looking at further sort of guidance on this issue, which should hopefully help to answer those questions that people have. We've got another question coming in, which is there any changes to the max hours of work allowed? Now, I'm assuming that is in regards to the student route, and if so, there aren't any that I'm aware of that changes to the maximum hours of work allowed. So I think off the top of my head, it was 20 hours previously allowed. So essentially, in short, not that I'm aware of, there aren't any changes to the work requirements or the work restrictions on the student route. Another question is, does the new graduate route apply to everyone for those who were in the UK before the 31st of December 2020? So this is where I suppose there's perhaps two different scenarios to think of here. The first is that if you're obviously an EU national and you are applying to the EU settlement scheme, so you're here before the 31st of December, if you apply to the EU settlement scheme, that essentially freezes your rights. So you can continue to live, work and study in the UK as was under the same arrangements, under the same sort of rights and freedoms as you would currently have. So in short, if you're an EU national, you don't need to apply for the graduate route. You have that ability to sort of look for work, and you have lots of freedoms that come with that. So you wouldn't need to apply for the graduate route. Now, if you then arrive, if you're an EU national and you arrive after the 1st of January, then you would be eligible for the graduate route. And if you wanted to remain in the UK after your studies, the graduate route would be the route that enables you to do that. And that obviously, that also applies to non-EU nationals as well. So if you're a student from, say, China, India, wherever it is in the world, you can apply for the graduate route from summer 2021. As I say, summer, we don't know exactly when, but it will be by the time you finish your course, if you are on a course that is started in, say, September and finishes in the autumn or the summer, you will be eligible to apply for the graduate route. And we are working with the Home Office on the sort of design and development of that route. So there will be further information that kind of comes out about that in the not too distant future, but we can't really say too much in terms of dates or anything available yet. But yeah, if you're an EU student here before the end of December, absolutely fine. You don't need to apply for that. If you arrive after the 1st of January or after the 1st of January, then yeah, the graduate route would enable you to stay for sort of 2 to 3 years, depending on what you've studied. Next question is, we have master's arrangements where students study 5 months in their home country and either 5 or 7 months in the UK, depending on whether they take their dissertation supervision in the UK or the home country. What are the key differences, advantages or disadvantages for students and art institutions between students choosing to study the short-term study visa versus the student route in this instance? I think I understand that question, but I think essentially sort of looking at if they're only going to be in the UK for a kind of fairly short amount of time, so like I say, sort of in that instance, I think 5 months, what would be the sort of route they would go for? I think the thing to stress is that the short-term study route, or coming for less than 6 months on the visa, on the visitor route, that is sort of more designed for a kind of a course or a sort of amount of learning which is less than 6 months. So strictly speaking, that is for courses and programs that are designed for less than 6 months. So if you're wanting to come for a kind of longer period than that, the appropriate route is the student route. And obviously, if you come via the student route, you are then eligible for the graduate route after that. So I think that's probably the key advantage to sort of focus in on that. If you want to be eligible for the graduate route, the student route is the kind of the vehicle through which that eligibility sort of is entailed, and you can sort of access the graduate route if you come via the student route. I will just emphasise the short-term study arrangements. The visitor route is meant to be just for sort of programs which are sort of short-term study arrangements, a piece of learning which is sort of less than 6 months. So if there is sort of if it is a scenario where an individual is taking a course which is longer than that, but they might be in the UK at different points, I think the appropriate route would still be the student route. I'm not sure if we have any further questions. Let me just look. Yes, we do. Give me 2 minutes and we will hopefully get some answers for you. So next question is how students certify their B2 level of, so this is B2 is referring to English language or English requirements rather, how they certify their B2 level if they want to come to study one semester or year. Will they have to sit an exam in their country to demonstrate the level, or a letter from the university will suffice to confirm the level? So I think the sort of key point in terms of when looking at assessing English, sort of English ability to sort of come to the UK, is it depends on what level you're coming to sort of what level you're coming to study at. So if you're coming to study at, say, kind of pre-sessional, there are certain requirements in terms of how you assess English. If you're coming for a sort of a degree level or kind of qualification or so, there are sort of recognised providers that you can use, and institutions are free to sort of assess English language and sort of English capabilities themselves. They just need to sort of do that via the sort of COS, that they would sort of provide with an individual. So there are different ways that you can assess English, really, but provided you are sort of you outline that effectively in the CAS, that sort of that should be sufficient. And I should say that the sponsor guidance that the Home Office produce, which sits alongside the kind of immigration rules and the sort of the stuff that we've been through today, that will outline in much clearer detail sort of exactly the different types of English language restrictions, or kind of rather how you assess English language. So like I say, there are differences depending on sort of what level of study an individual is coming for. So we've had, I think, quite a few questions. I am sort of conscious though that we are now coming up to sort of 2:45, which is when we said this webinar would finish. So I just wanted to thank everyone for sort of attending today. If you have asked a question and we've not been able to answer it yet, then rest assured we will sort of get back to you in due course. And I guess the final thing to say is, like I say, just thanks again for attending, and I hope this has been a useful and informative session. And there will be sort of slides will be available, and a recording of this will be made available on the Monday following this broadcast as well. So thanks very much and take care.